Okay, so Armani has come out with a reformulated Luminous Silk foundation. I'm doing this because I'm obsessed with my rings. And About Face came out with new concealers. Like a little while ago, I'm a little bit slow to this. I want to talk about olive tones. Olive tones for all my olive people, okay? I want to talk about the foundation first. I do have 2 of the concealer shades, so we will get into that. Now, Armani's recent reformulation. I do have the old one. So I would like to do a little bit of a comparison. Today we're gonna be doing a wear test of the new Armani foundation. Mostly not so much for the formula. Like I care less about the formula. The Lipstick Lesbians talked about the formula. Go check them out. Like they did a really good breakdown of it. I'm more so interested in the slight changes in the shade. And we'll get into that. In terms of the About Face foundation, I'm interested in doing a wear test. So yeah. So within this reformulation, Armani also talked about including ultramarine, I have such a hard time saying that all the time, and olive pigments to tone down orange and pink tones in the foundations. Now, from what I understand, for the most part, the ultramarine pigments were included more so in deeper shades, to help prevent things from looking orange on the skin. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to track down like which shades in particular were slightly adjusted, but apparently there were like some shades were dropped or like renamed, or kind of like moved around. So if you had like a favorite shade, it might be kind of confusing for you. I was initially shade 3 and I do have the old formula. And one of my criticisms, I've always loved the formula. I thought it was beautiful. From what the Lipstick Lesbians said, it seems that the new formula is not quite as luminous as it once was, but you know, whatever. Like I said, check them out for the formula, the actual formula. I want to talk about color. I did always find that it was kind of like more of this yellowy orange color on me, and a lot of people complain about oxidation over time. Which is why I want to do a wear test of this, because some of the things that I read about the new formula is that there's less oxidation and that the inclusion of olive and ultramarine pigments, again, there might be an inclusion of olive in like some of the lighter shades, helped to kind of tone down that like yellowy orange. So let's do a quick swatch. So this is the OG, the original, which is described as like a very fair, warm shade, basically. It was not described as olive. Unfortunately, you know, and I don't know why, but a brand like Armani really seems to kind of like overlook people who are light and have olive skin tones. But I always, because I am like a little bit more on the yellow side, I always try to tend towards something that's looking a little bit more yellow. However, I don't like orange. And this was something that I always noticed from this foundation, is that it would oxidize relatively orange. Now let's compare to the new. Now from what I see instantly is that like it's ever so slightly more neutral. There's actually less of that yellow tone in this shade, which to me doesn't look like there's much olive in it, to be honest. When I am looking at it right now, this looks like it's oxidizing more so on like the very yellow side, and this looks like there's more of a peach tone to it. So, you know, for someone like me, especially because I am going to be using concealers that are actually olive, like I said, we'll get into that, I can balance the tone, but it really depends, especially if like you're more of like a cool toned olive. This is probably going to end up looking a little too orange on you, because I'm just seeing that orange tone. Now I kind of want to just let this sit and see like how it oxidizes. But from right here, I'm just seeing like a little bit more of like a red tone in it, to be honest. So I'm going to leave these swatches to oxidize so that we can come back to them. But I want to apply the foundation. I'm going to be using a slightly damp beauty blender to apply this. The formula looks thinner too, which is interesting. Like the new formula looks a little bit thinner. It looks a little less full coverage, but I wonder if that's simply because there's less of that kind of intense, like saturated pigment. So I have always kind of liked the Armani Luminous Silk foundation, but I have foundations that are just a better color match. So I don't really use them that often. And if I'm totally honest with you, because it's a slightly thinner formula, and this feels even thinner, I think. Well, not quite thinner. It has like a little bit, like slightly more of a grip. It's not so far off in the way that it feels from the About Face foundation. But it is like, it's not a heavy coverage foundation. It's not like a full coverage matte foundation. Obviously, it's Armani Luminous Silk. It tends to be soaked up by sponges. I just really like applying with sponges. I would rather like go through a little extra foundation and be able to apply it with a sponge than a brush, but a brush might be better in terms of like maintaining that coverage. So this tone blended out doesn't look too bad to me right now. And that's one of the things that I try to keep in mind when it comes to like a skin tint. Like I want to get as close to my skin tone as possible, but I'm obviously not going to be applying it in like thick streaks on my face. So as long as when it's blended out, it sort of like is able to, you know, blend into my skin tone, then I feel better about it. Okay, so to prep my skin today, I just did my Bioma Hydrating Mist, or Balancing Face Mist, and then my CeraVe PM lotion, like moisturizing lotion. It's pretty much been what I do to like prep my skin for everything. Let's do a deep zoom. So right now, the tone looks decent. Like it looks pretty decent on my skin. Like it doesn't look too bad. You can kind of see when I like pull, I hope you can see this. When I look in the mirror, you can see that I have a lot more of this like yellowy green color in my hand than is actually on my face. So the color has like neutralized the tone of my face a little bit more. So it's definitely not a perfect match. Like it's definitely not a perfect match, but that's not the end of the world. I'm just waiting for these to oxidize a little bit more. Personally for me, because I am just like very yellow looking, I feel like I prefer the old color. Like I really do. I think I prefer the old color because it just has more of that. It has a little bit more brightness to it, which like when there's a little too much pink in my, now I'm using pink loosely. Obviously this foundation is not pink, but when I compare it to this, it's definitely more so on like the slightly more like red side than the yellow side. And that can make me, like if there's a little too much red in a foundation, that can make me and the olive in my skin look kind of like drab. It really just kind of like removes the saturation and the color from my skin. That being said, I mean, the coverage is fine. Like it looks pretty. It's definitely not meant to be like a heavy coverage or even really medium coverage foundation in my opinion. It's more so like a very natural coverage. I went over this area 3 times and didn't really like build up coverage. However, I was using a sponge. And so if you do want to build up more coverage with this type of foundation, a brush is probably best. Okay, I'm going to do the stuff that I do before concealer. So like contouring and bronzing, and I'll be back, and probably brows. Look how tall my hair is. Okay, so I just finished contouring, bronzing. That's basically it. I don't know what to do with it before I like style it. So let's talk about it. So I think it looks pretty decent. Like it has definitely a nice finish. Personally, I would say that it's ever so slightly less luminous than the original formula. Because I'm someone who tends to get like pretty shiny in this area, and I'm not seeing as much as I usually do, which is nice. The color looks fine now that I have gone in with my contour and bronze. I think like overall it works relatively well, and we are going to be using a more olive concealer. So let's talk about the swatches. So this is the original formula, which you can definitely see a lot more of that like orangey yellow tone in it. And then the new formula is definitely like a little bit more on the neutral side. I don't know that I necessarily see like much oxidation in either of them. I think like once the original formula dries down, it just becomes like a little bit more apparent if you're not aware of it, that of like the overall tone of it. And I'm just definitely seeing like when I turn it, I see this like orangey peach, like a peach color. in there. And it is, when I look in the mirror, more apparent that it's kind of created a little bit more of like a peach tone to my skin in comparison to my hand. So it's definitely not a perfect match. It just isn't, you know what I mean? However, if you are someone who was like, oh my God, I hated the yellow tone of the original shade, you might like this better, you know? Let's get into concealer. So I'm sorry that it took me so long to talk about these. So these are the Illusionist Skin Focused Concealers from About Face. I've always liked their packaging. It's not like completely unique to them. Like there's other people who have packaging like this, but I do like it. And it is like a tiny version of the foundation, which is nice. Now, About Face already proved to me that they were creating beautiful olive tones when they launched their initial foundation. They do have some really beautiful olive tones, like true olive tones. So the one that I've been using is F2 Olive, which is quite nice. It's maybe like a shade, half a shade dark for my skin. And it's ever so slightly more so on like the neutral olive side. It's lacking a little bit more of that like yellowy warmth, that I tend to prefer as like a slightly more warm olive. But it's quite nice. It is quite nice. And I know that so many of you who happen to be like around my skin tone feel like just absolutely love it. Like love it so much. Actually, while we were talking about it, one of the things that I've been doing recently is mixing the House Labs foundation with the About Face foundation, because House Labs is like maybe half a shade light, and it's definitely like more so of like a yellowy tone. So when I mix these together, I get like a beautiful shade and such a beautiful finish. And I gotta say, I forgot how much I love mixing foundations. Like it's just a way to like really customize your finish. I don't know. I know that it, you know, you don't want it to necessarily be like the norm, I guess, that you have to like buy multiple foundations. But if you happen to have one that, you know, is maybe a little bit light and slightly more on one side of a tone, and one that's like a little dark and slightly more on the other side of a tone, or just maybe the tones are a little bit like off, mixing them to sort of balance those tones or balance, you know, the color overall can be just like a really nice, you know, whatever. You basically have two foundations, they're gonna last twice as long. And you might be surprised at like how they come together and create like such a beautiful finish. So the concealers, I have two shades. I have F1 Olive and F2 Olive. I'll be honest with you, when I looked at them initially, I was like, they look exactly the same. Like they're so close. Like F1 Olive is like, that's F1, right? Yeah, it's like basically the same color. Like you see the tiniest little bit of a difference there. And these are the two olive shades that are like close to my skin tone. So I kind of like, I usually like a tone to conceal and correct and stuff. And then I want one that's like a little bit lighter if I want to highlight. But these are so similar. I'll give you swatches. Yeah, F1 is like already basically my skin tone. Gorgeous. Okay, so obviously you can see beautiful, beautiful olive tones. Stunning olive tones. Absolutely beautiful. Like, oh, doing it right. Doing it right. So this is F2 Olive, which is relatively close to the foundation. I kind of liked what Rare Beauty did. Was it Rare Beauty? Where like the foundation was a little bit darker than the concealer. So that like you knew, okay, here's my concealer that like can brighten a little bit. But I mean, if you're somebody who doesn't really like care to brighten, then maybe you, I don't know. Here, okay, let's get into my thoughts. So I have tried this concealer. We are going to use it today. First, let's just note that F2 is like pretty dark for me personally. F1 is like basically my skin tone. So it's a beautiful match, but it's definitely not like a highlighting concealer. The formula of the concealer, I think I was a little bit disappointed when I first swatched it, because I was like, it feels like the foundation to me. Like it basically feels like the foundation. Let me swatch this. So here is the foundation, F2 Olive, which upon first swatch, now this has had, you know, this is setting, upon first swatch is definitely more of that sort of like yellowy, has a yellowy orange tone. So let's see how that sort of like sets down to compare. But you can definitely see like when I squinted it now, and that's why I want it to set, this looks a little bit lighter than the concealer, which is kind of strange. Yeah, and the concealers overall look much more olive. That being said, the formulas just feel so similar. Yeah, they just feel so similar. Like, I think the foundation is maybe a little bit of a thinner formula than the concealer, but the concealer doesn't provide like that much more coverage in terms of like how the formula feels on my skin. Those were my initial thoughts. So let's apply. We'll wait for this to oxidize so that we can finally like compare shades. So I'm gonna be using F1 Olive, obviously, since F2 is definitely too light for me. And I'm gonna place this in the areas of my face where, number one, I need like maybe just like a little bit more coverage, but also considering my foundation is a little bit more neutral, I wanna create a little more balance in my face. I do get redness on my chin. I like to highlight just there. I'm gonna add a little more coverage in this area where I tend to get a little bit of redness. I like to go here. And I'm just gonna bring this up like a little bit more. I've been doing this thing where I don't even put the concealer on my dark circles because it like kind of migrates up there anyway. And then I am going to use it to kind of carve out a little cheekbone moment. Now I'm gonna go in with the Nikki N16 brush. I think I have another one of these somewhere, but the handle is cracking, which I'm worried about. I'm sad about that. I don't think I left it like wet or anything, but anyway. So I'm gonna go in with this and just start patting it out. So you'll notice that like the formula is definitely more, to me, like medium coverage. And it has like decent coverage. Like it's not like it's light coverage or it doesn't cover anything. Like it definitely has a medium coverage that does feel like slightly buildable, but it doesn't have like a heavy feel on the skin, which is nice. I think I was, bear in mind, you know, compared to the Armani foundation, I am patting this in with a brush. So using a synthetic brush with your creams is going to provide a little bit more coverage than if you're going in with a damp sponge. So that's just something to keep in mind. And you can be strategic with like how you are applying each product. If you tend to be heavy-handed with one or the other, then you can kind of default to, you know, brush versus sponge to make up for that. It does blend quite nicely. I think my initial, like just now, I do wish it were ever so slightly more light. Like I like this for, I was gonna say mixing, matching my skin tone. But I do wish that I had one that was olive that was a little bit lighter. So the fact that this is the lightest one is just a little disappointing for me. Actually, let me double check that. Let me just make sure. I'm pretty sure it's the lightest olive tone. Like I don't think there's a 0. And then what's annoying is that like the lightest, like if there is a lighter shade, it's probably gonna be pink. You know what I mean? Yeah, so F0 cool, and then F1 fair neutral for fair neutral undertone. So that would be interesting. I would be interested in trying F1 neutral, and if it's something that like you need, information that you need, let me know and I can pick that up. Obviously I'm not gonna pick up the cool one because why would I do that? For pinkish blue undertones, like stop. So I wanna see how this sans any color corrector, because I've only ever used it with a color corrector. Provides a little bit of coverage. I'm also kind of embracing my dark circles. Like I just decided that like, they kind of look like makeup anyway. You know what I mean? Like if I just kind of blur this bottom here, you know what I mean? Like, isn't that kind of like dark and mysterious? I know there are those of you who watch who are like, I love your dark circles. And I'm kind of like, you know what? Me too. Like, I feel like I'm getting to that point. The tone is very nice. And I actually do like the coverage amount right now. And it actually blends quite nicely with a brush, which I appreciate. I'm not someone who feels very confident with blending makeup with brushes. Despite my artistic background, I've always been better with sponges for whatever reason. So that looks actually quite nice. And I think that formula, the About Face formula, works nicely with the Armani Luminous Silk foundation. It's definitely not, it's nicely hydrating, but it's not too wet, you know? It's definitely not like a ridiculously wet formula. It's not too matte. It has a little bit more of like a satin kind of sheen, which is quite nice for the under eyes. Now, I personally can see a little bit of a gray tone coming through because I didn't do any color corrector underneath my eyes. So what I think I'm gonna do is take the slightly darker shade, F2 Olive, and I'm just gonna pop a little bit here, just to add a little bit more and just see how that goes. Usually I would be using something that's like more of a yellowy tone. So the coverage is slightly buildable, which is nice. And it definitely does feel hydrating on the skin. That really helps the Armani melt into my skin. Now it looks like one with my neck, you know? Let's zoom out really quickly before I do any spot concealing. Yeah, that looks quite nice. I do think that the About Face tone is a little less, it's like slightly more of the like a neutral cool olive tone. So you really do see less of that like yellowy green color that you can see in my hand, in my face. But like overall, I think it works. Like I think it works. I think from like it's not something that you're necessarily paying attention to. Personally, for me, I would prefer to be using something that's like a neutral olive tone on my whole face, and then something that's like a little bit more of like a yellowy bright concealer in the center of my face, because I think it gives my face more life, gives it more brightness. And this, it's not that it's bad, like I think it works, but overall the finish of it definitely makes me look a little bit more gray. You know what I mean? In terms of this combination, I prefer doing it the other way around. Let's look at the swatches before we do any spot concealing. So yeah, F2 Olive, the concealer, is still a little bit darker than the foundation, I think. And the foundation actually has a little bit more of an orange tone to it. You can kind of see like a little bit more orangey peach compared to the concealer. Like the concealer is definitely more olive, has more olive, which might be making it look a little bit darker. And then, yeah, I mean, these are just like, they're so close in tone. I really wish that there was a little bit of a bigger difference. Like if this was just like a shade lighter, or even half a shade, I would really like that. Or if they just like added one more, like a brightening, because I know that there are people out there who are olive who are lighter than me. You know what I mean? But it is quite nice. Let's spot conceal. Again, I'm going to go in with F1. Actually, I'm going to put both. You know what? I'll just use what's on my hand. It's already thickened up. That's what we need. So I'm going to be using F1 Olive for areas in the center of my face. And then I'll use F2 Olive in the areas where I like contoured or bronzed. Now this is where I'm a little worried, because I typically like a concealer that's a little bit more full coverage than this for spot concealing. However, the hydration in this concealer does feel like it would be really nice for people who are dealing with those like dry breakouts, you know, and just can't handle the heavy coverage concealer, especially if like they just don't have the time to do all of the skin prep required to prevent that like creasing and caking and flaking and, you know, bunching and all that stuff. It's a beautiful shade match. Like F1 Olive is such a beautiful shade match for me, truly. I think it's better than my Kosas concealer. Something that, like, especially when it comes to spot concealing these like heavier breakouts, because of that hydration, it feels like I'm allowed to put a little extra down and it's not going to end up looking cakey. And because it's a slightly more liquidy formula compared to what I would typically use, which would have like a slightly more creamy sort of formula and a little bit more coverage. I have a little hair on my nose, or like right on my cheek, and it's tickling me every time I talk. I don't know if any other YouTuber deals with this problem, but like having cats, man, there's just always tiny little fuzzes everywhere. Anyway, it allows you to apply like a little more to the area. And because it's like a little bit more liquidy, it makes it a lot easier to just kind of like blend those edges. Like that's quite nice. That is quite nice. I have a scar here that is becoming more pronounced as I get older, and every single time I'm like, I think it's a breakout. And I try to conceal it and it won't go away. What the fuck? Okay, so here's the close-up of everything. I really do think it came together really nicely. I think both of the finishes look really nice on my skin. And that olive tone is just, it's really beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. Of the about face. Okay, I'm going to finish my makeup. I'm going to do powder, blush, all that stuff, my eyes off camera. We'll come back and check in. And this is going to be a wear test, okay? So this is good timing. I'm actually going to be going to an event. So we'll see how it wears through all of that. Hopefully well, so I don't look horrible. Okay, so I finished my makeup. Obviously, it took way longer than I wanted it to. Let's zoom in because I did notice some things. I did notice that this one in particular right here, like this breakout right here, it did, like, because the formula of the concealer was a little bit more liquidy, when I went in and set it with powder, which, you know, I'm always very gentle when I'm applying powder, especially like in areas where I want to maintain coverage, it kind of pulled that coverage off. I also did notice that a little bit here, basically everywhere where I concealed. Some of the more like, you know, not as pigmented or red or deep spots were like just not affected as much, but they weren't affected as much, but in particular this one, which was my like biggest breakout. And it does make sense. The concealer itself, it's set relatively well underneath my eyes, you know, like I think my under eyes actually look quite nice. I set the way that I always do, which is why I didn't show it on camera, which is just with my Huda powder and a brush. So if you are like, what? Just check out any of my other videos where I do a full face of makeup. You'll see it. But yeah, so I think it looks relatively nice. Like I think the finish is relatively nice, but because it is a thinner formula, it was pulled off a little bit, which isn't the end of the world. And since I am going to an event, I am going to cover that because I haven't been to an event in a very long time and I'm not trying to leave this house ruining my reputation. You know what I mean? Look at me leaving my apartment, by the way. So yeah, I just wanted to pop in and let you know that was the case for these little spots. I'm just going to do a little bit of touching up. But overall, I think the color is quite nice. I think the finish is quite nice. I think in particular, I will be interested to see how my under eyes last through like smiling and stuff. Cause like, look, when I smile, because that's how I smile, all these lines. So I'll be very interested. I treated it the same way that I always do. I didn't do all my tiny little tricks of like trying to, make it perfect and not crease all day long with like the setting spray. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll pop a video up here. All my little tricks to prevent creasing because I want to see how the concealer works itself. Okay, so I will see you later tonight. Okay, we'll talk about this in a second. It's the next day. So here's what happened. I went to an event. It was for a Complexion product. I've said I'm a terrible YouTuber. I've said it a million times. And I started like, I'm having a good time. I'm hanging out with the makeup artist and we're just like, she was so lovely. And we just like, I wasn't paying attention. And basically she was like, do you want me to put some of it on you? And I was like, yeah. And then so she started putting Complexion product on me, kind of like everywhere. And then I was like, it wasn't until I was in the Uber on the way home that I was like, I just totally fucked up my wear test. Like I completely ruined it. So today I was live streaming and I was like, okay, I'll just do it over again. I'll apply the concealer the exact same way, the foundation the exact same way. We'll do a wear test today. So that's exactly what I did, which is why I look different. And then I was I had lunch, I did the dishes and I did a bunch of stuff. And then I totally forgot and I was about to like take a shower and I put a hair mask in. So that's why I have the Après hair mask, Mon Repair hair mask in my hair right now. So that's why I look like this. I was like, oh fuck, I need to film the ending of that. Hello. So yeah, just two days in a row of being the worst YouTuber in the entire world. So let's zoom in and take a look at this. Held up pretty fucking well. Held up pretty well. I've been wearing this all day. I started doing my makeup at like noon. So I immediately started applying my foundation. I prepped my face the exact same way. So I probably have had the concealer on for like close to 7 hours. And my complexion looks gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful. My makeup has worn beautifully. The only criticisms that I have for the concealer, that right there, okay? That right there. Okay? In terms of my under eyes, beautiful. Wore beautifully. Stunning. Like, moved with my face really well. Despite like moving around, obviously, and like, you know, just life. And like, also I was doing my makeup through a live stream. I was live for like over 3 hours, smiling, talking, laughing, emoting, making crazy faces. Looks really gorgeous. And I think you would agree that the wear is very, very nice. So to wrap it up, basically, the Armani Luminous Silk foundation, obviously we saw like a slight tone change in the foundation. In terms of formula, still beautiful, you know? If this is the type of finish that you like. I don't personally find it to be like so incredibly different from the original, so that is nice. I actually prefer that it seems to be ever so slightly less luminous in like just a tad bit more satin, which I do prefer. I think the tone is fine. It's not perfect for me, obviously. I would like to see more brands gearing their makeup towards like people who are pale olive, because there's plenty of us. Like, you know, we're out here. So I was a little bit shocked to see that like the lightest shades in the range are not that, like not a whole lot of pale shades for the pale people. And not a whole lot of diversity in the shades. So hopefully people who are more like medium to have deep skin tones, if you have been struggling with like things looking very, very red and orange on you, hopefully more of the like the inclusion of the olive and ultramarine pigments help that. I would love to hear from anyone who, you know, has a deeper skin tone, who's tried it out, if they've made any like positive changes in that regard. In terms of the concealer, I think it's beautiful. Like, I really do. I wish that there was, again, like a little bit more emphasis on paler shades, because I have like a good match tone, you know, for what's it called? F1 olive. Beautiful match for my skin tone. I'd like to have something a little bit lighter to do, like if I wanted to do a little bit of highlighting so that I didn't have to mix, you know? I do like it for the under eyes. I do. I think I was surprised by the formula. It's just like so close to the foundation formula that it's like I was expecting something a little bit more full coverage. And in terms of spot concealing, that's why, like when it comes to spot concealing, which is mostly what I use concealer for a lot of the time, I need that coverage. Like I need something that's a little bit thicker. And the formula is just a little bit too liquidy that it doesn't conceal those like deeper, bigger, more red breakouts. So those are my thoughts. About Face, obviously, like they really nail the olive tones. So if you are similar to me in skin tone, definitely check them out if you've been looking for a concealer that's going to be like right on. If you are looking for a concealer similar in tone, the Kosas Revealer Concealer in the shade 0.5N is like very close to olive. It's quite nice. It's a little bit more on the neutral side. You can see, which one is this? Yeah, this is F1. But you can see it's slightly lighter. I don't know how well you can tell. It's a little bit more neutrally, so it has a little bit less of an olive tone to it than the About Face concealer. But the formula, I like it a little bit better. Adds a little bit more coverage, also beautiful wear. So there's that. Those are my closing thoughts. I hope that this video was helpful for any of you who were interested in these products. Overall, maybe you were curious about the Armani like shade changes. I think most of the time when we think of like reformulations, we don't think necessarily about like changes in shade. We think mostly about like changes in the actual formulation, like texture, how it's gonna wear. I'm pretty happy with the way that it has worn on my skin the last 2 days, so that's nice. Yeah, whatever. If you were interested in the olive concealers, I was getting a lot of comments from people about the About Face concealers. And when I first tried it, I was just like, really disappointed that it didn't have more coverage. So I was kind of putting it off. So I'm glad that I tried it. I do think it's nice. I will probably mix it with things to get like a lighter shade, you know? And I'm probably not gonna use it to spot conceal. Or I'll mix it with something else. Anyway, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe and blah, 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 blah. And join me for live streams on Thursdays at 12 p.m. PST. Think of anything else while I look for my remote? No. Okay, bye.